I'm just going to share with you a few ideas that I think reflect the tender mercies of God and also are just some of my favorite ideas that have helped my life. So I love this billboard. It says, forgive your former self or forgive your younger self, believe in your current self, create your future self. So this is kind of going to be the short theme of my talk, I guess you could say, is that we have the ability to change as people. And so you're not going to be the same person in 2-3 years from now as you are today, just like you're not the same person you were a few years ago. You've actually grown, you've changed, you've become a new person. And you can get better and better at looking back on your former self and seeing the changes you've made. And it's important to give your former self grace, because your former self, the person you were maybe a year ago or 3 or 5 years ago, didn't know the things you know today. And so they didn't have the ability or the agency to make the choices you can make today. So I'll just give you a quick little background on myself, share a little bit of my story, and then I'll share with you how you can heal your past, because your past is actually very flexible. That's one thing that's really amazing, is your past isn't actually set in stone. Your past is actually a meaning, for the most part, which you can actually change. You can heal the meaning of your past. And then also you can not be so rigid or stuck in the person you think you are today. And you have a lot of creative control about who your future self will be. So just as a quick little bit of background on myself, I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I went to Cottonwood High School. So if you know where that is, that's where I went to high school. When I was 11 years old, so I'm the oldest of 3 boys. When I was 11 years old, my parents got divorced, and it was a pretty rough divorce. And both of my parents ended up going less active in the church. And the divorce was kind of a shocker for my dad. He was not expecting it, didn't see it coming, and it drove him to a pretty deep and dark depression, which depression ultimately led him to becoming a pretty extreme drug addict. So I'm 11 years old at the time. I'm the oldest of 3 boys. My parents get divorced. My mom's no longer going to church. My dad's no longer going to church. And now my dad's kind of becoming kind of an interesting guy. He's becoming a drug addict, and my house is becoming an unsafe environment, and I'm not really sure how to cope with it. And so I just do my best to kind of ignore it. So that was kind of my life through my junior high and high school years. It just got worse and worse all through junior high and high school. There was very little stability, very little going on. And I didn't really know how to cope or handle with that situation. I wasn't going to church myself, but I actually luckily did have a testimony. I'd gained a testimony when I was a young boy. And so I believed in God, and I had a desire to actually serve a church mission, even though I wasn't really going to church and I wasn't really living the gospel. So I guess you could say one of the first tender mercies that I had was having an amazing grandpa. My grandpa Rex, who we just named our sixth child after, he was my dad's dad who adopted my father. He was just a strong man in the church, amazing guy. And he would always push me to go on a mission and just to make the right choices, even when I was not part of the church. And so he was an amazing force in my life. And without him, I don't think I'd be where I'm at. And so he was just always someone there. And so one thing I invite you as you're listening to this is just think, who's someone that's there in your life that maybe you're not giving enough credit to, that they may not be doing anything specific, but just their presence in your life is actually keeping you moving to some degree in the right direction. I then had a bishop who was my former bishop. He hadn't seen me in church for several years, but he started reaching out to me, and he'd come pick me up at my mom's apartment and take me out to lunch. And he helped me to believe that I could repent. He helped me to believe that I could go on a mission. And so he just started taking me to lunch, and ultimately I did go on a mission. I served a mission. And while I was serving my mission, my dad actually overcame all of his addictions, and he ended up eventually working in the addiction recovery department, I guess you could say, of the church, where he would help run addiction groups. And so he's an amazing guy. He's changed his life. We're very close friends. And one of the things I love is that even though in the past I had a really negative view of my dad, I had a really negative view of his choices, his behavior, I don't feel that way anymore. I don't see things the same way my younger self did. I don't have to be angry at my dad anymore. And I don't know, and I also don't need to see my past the same way that the 15-year-old version of me saw it. One of the things that I did was more recently, probably in the last 3 or 4 years, I asked my dad to tell me what led him to his choices. I didn't really know what had led him to his decisions. And he was able to share with me a lot of things that I did not even know about. A lot of the things he was going through, stuff from his background as a child. And when you get more clarity, or when you actually get more context, you have a lot more empathy. And so because I was able to see where he was coming from, I could understand what led him to the choices he made, and I was able to easily forgive him and also understand where he was coming from. I was also able to just look at his life and how much he's grown, he's changed. I've also been able to look at my own life and how much those experiences actually were blessings in my life. And so it may sound strange, but I'm actually glad that those experiences happened. And so one of the things that's important to having a healthy and a happy life is that you want to have a positive view of your past, regardless of whatever happened. Doesn't matter what happened. It's the meaning you give to what happened. And you can either avoid your past or you can transform your past. And we all have the ability to transform the past. The atonement of Jesus Christ is obviously a big part of that. He can help us to see things differently than we saw them. He can help us to forgive our former self. He can help us to have compassion towards our former self, or even other people's former selves. I can be compassionate towards my dad 10, 15 years ago. I don't have to still be mad at who he was back then, because he's not the same guy anymore, and I'm not the same guy anymore. And so it's important to realize you're not the same person you used to be, and you don't have to view your past the same way you used to see it. And the goal is actually that you're grateful for your past. There's a lot of research on this subject. I'll just give one little bit. One of the things, there's a concept called post-traumatic growth, and it's the opposite of obviously PTSD, which is where you're still traumatized by your past. One of the key things you want to do to heal your past is talk about it with people, get other people's perspectives, because that gives you more context. But another thing that's simple, aside from developing a relationship with God, is journaling about it, writing in your journal about your experiences, and you could ask in prayer for help, but writing down the benefits that you've gotten, or the things that you've learned, or the things that this experience has enabled you to do that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. An experience is traumatic if it disables you, if it stops you from having a better or a bigger future. Whereas if you can look to your past, whatever that experience was, and ask yourself, how can I be better because of this experience, rather than being bitter because of it? Like, what use can I get out of this? A big key to post-traumatic growth is that you see usefulness in your experiences. And I see a ton of usefulness in my experiences through my teenage years. I can use those experiences to make better choices now. And so if you can use those experiences, then they have purpose, they have meaning, they're gains, they're benefits. And that allows you to have more purpose towards your future. So I just want to let you know, whoever's listening to this, whatever you've gone through, that you can look at it differently in the future. Your future self will look at it a lot differently than maybe you look at it now. And you can also look at your past differently than you looked at it back then. You can choose to frame it from a positive perspective, and you can use it rather than be abused by it. And it's your choice, the meaning you give to your experiences. So that's one big thing. Just in the last minute or two, I'll just tell you kind of the idea of fixed mindset versus growth mindset. So basically the idea of a growth mindset is that you view your future self as, in large part, a different person than your future self. At least in capacity and capability, they can do things that you can't do. They know things you don't know. Maybe they're more compassionate. Maybe they've got skills you don't have. Maybe they see things differently. And so if you had a fixed mindset, and the research actually shows this, most people think that their future self is mostly going to be the same person as they are today. But the truth is that your future self will be quite different. They'll have different priorities. They'll care about different things. And so you don't want to hold so tightly to who you think you are today. You want to be more flexible. You also want to start imagining who you want your future self to be, because your view of your future self is actually the thing that drives your behavior today. And so you want to start thinking, who do I want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And the more specific you can get, the more clear your behavior can be today. And I just would like to testify, and I think that this is something that's amazing about the gospel, is that Heavenly Father allows us to make our own choices. And we are shaped by the desires that we have, and we can choose those desires, and we can learn and develop those desires, and we can ultimately think about who we want to be. And then in the present, we can start making decisions and actions now to become that future self. And I've been able to apply that principle. I applied it to get on a mission, even when it didn't even look like I was going to the church. I knew that if I'd gone on a mission, my future would be enormously better. And I continue to apply that today. So I guess I'll just leave that with you. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Hopefully you can still see me. So anyways, yeah, just want to say the past can be healed. The past can be positive. And in order to have a really happy, functional life, you actually want to have a positive past and a really exciting and compelling future, which you feel like you have control over. And that has a lot to do with hope. So hope that helped, and have an amazing day.